Tonight, we drift through time to the city where prayers, wars, and whispers have echoed for thousands of years, Jerusalem, the heart that never truly sleeps. The night begins softly, as it should. You hear the low hum of wind brushing across ancient stone, the faint clink of something metallic, perhaps a lantern hook swaying in the breeze. The city lies before you, layered and restless, as though the centuries themselves are stacked unevenly, like mismatched pottery on an old merchant's shelf. Jerusalem. A name that feels heavier than most. A word that has survived tongues, empires, earthquakes, and good intentions. It's been called Jerusalem, Al-Quds, Hierosolima, names spoken in awe, in anger, in song. You take a slow breath. The air tastes dry, but it carries the faint smell of olive oil and dust. Somewhere, incense burns, a sharp, almost sweet note that hangs in the night like memory itself. You probably won't make it through this day. That's fine. Most people don't. Before we step into the noise of conquest and devotion, I'll ask gently. Take a moment to breathe. If you're enjoying this quiet beginning, go ahead and like the video. It keeps this sleepy little corner of the internet alive. And if you feel like it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is there. I'd love to know where in the world you're dreaming from tonight. Now, let's ease into our journey. You open your eyes to dawn. The light is the color of soft parchment, slipping over stone domes and tiled rooftops. The city stirs, not with cars or sirens, but with voices and sandals and the creak of old wooden shutters. It's somewhere around 1000 BC, give or take a debate or two. Historians still argue over the precise century when Jerusalem became more than a hillside settlement. But here, in the cool of early morning, it feels eternal, a maze of alleys carved into history itself. You walk down a narrow path where the stones are uneven, worn smooth by feet that have long since turned to dust. Chickens peck near doorways. Someone pours water into a clay jug. A woman hums a tune while grinding grain. The air is filled with simple sounds of survival. It's strange to think that this small, busy place, barely a city by modern standards, will one day be the axis around which empires spin. But for now, it's almost humble. King David is said to have captured this city from the Jebusites, establishing it as the capital of his kingdom. He was drawn not just by its high, defensible hills, but by something less tangible, a sense of destiny, perhaps. Or maybe, as you suspect, he was just tired of moving tents. You pass a group of children chasing a goat, laughing in the morning light. It's a sound that cuts through time easily, the sound of people not yet aware they're living in the middle of history. Somewhere near the citadel, an old man sits carving small wooden idols, even though such things are frowned upon. He catches your eye, shrugs, and says in a low voice, "Old habits die slower than prophets." You can't argue with that. The scent of baking flatbread drifts through the air. You follow it to a small stall where a woman sells loaves warm from a clay oven. The bread crackles softly as you break it open, crisp outside, soft within. You wonder how many empires have risen and fallen over something this simple. You keep walking. Jerusalem reveals itself like layers of paint under sunlight: Canaanite, Jebusite, Israelite. You can almost hear the ghosts arguing over who got here first. That's your first historical fact for the night. Jerusalem's earliest known settlers date back to the 4th millennium BC, making it one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. That's roughly 40 centuries of morning bread and human stubbornness. As you climb the stone steps toward the hilltop, the view unfolds: olive groves stretching into the horizon, the faint shimmer of the desert beyond. You can see why armies would fight for this. From here, the land seems to belong to whoever can look the furthest. But don't be fooled by the serenity. This city has never been still for long. Every generation seems to think it's the first to claim Jerusalem, and every one of them leaves behind a wall, a scar, or a prayer. You pause by a well, watching a young shepherd draw water for his sheep. He nods politely. Then, as if sensing your thoughts, he says, "Everyone wants this place. No one truly keeps it." There's a wry wisdom in that. The kind that comes from living close to dust and divine ambition. By afternoon, the city grows louder. Traders shout. Donkeys bray. Someone argues over grain prices with the same passion a modern person might reserve for Wi-Fi issues. An obscure tidbit for you: in ancient Jerusalem, perfume merchants sold oils made from myrrh and balsam so strong that visitors were sometimes warned to dilute them with olive oil, or risk dizziness. You make a note not to sniff too deeply. As evening falls, the walls of David's citadel glow gold in the fading sun. The sound of music, flutes, drums, and something like a harp, echoes through the streets. A festival perhaps, or maybe just another night of celebration in a city that always seems to be waiting for something. You find yourself on a rooftop as twilight deepens. Candles flicker in every window. From up here, the rooftops form a kind of puzzle, each piece belonging to a family, a faith, a memory. A warm breeze stirs your hair. You exhale slowly, feeling the weight of centuries settle around you like a blanket. If history teaches anything, it's that peace is always temporary, but moments like this, the quiet between storms, are what linger. You look up. The stars over Jerusalem are sharp and endless. Somewhere below, a baby cries, a dog barks, a door creaks closed. You can almost believe, for a heartbeat, that time itself has stopped to listen. Morning again, or something like it. The air is cooler now, the kind that hints at change. You walk down a familiar street, noticing how each house leans a little more than before. The stones shift beneath your sandals, like the city itself is adjusting to new ownership. It's a few centuries later. Empires have moved in and out like tired guests at an inn. Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, everyone seems to have taken a turn at redecorating. You pause by a market stall where a scribe is copying something onto papyrus. His hands move with slow precision, the way someone might handle sacred relics or overpriced electronics. You lean in and see the faint outlines of Hebrew script, psalms, prayers, poetry. Words meant to outlast destruction. That's your historical fact for this section. During the Babylonian exile, 6th century BC, Jewish scribes preserved sacred texts by hand, often in secret, ensuring the continuity of their culture and faith even in captivity. You think about that as you walk. In a world where messages vanish after 24 hours, the patience required to hand copy belief feels almost alien. Nearby, a potter hums as he spins clay into bowls. "It's all cycles," he mutters. "Nations rise, nations fall, but someone always needs a bowl." You smile. It's oddly comforting. The city has changed hands again, but the streets still smell of bread and smoke and humanity. The walls have been rebuilt, patched, torn down, and rebuilt again. Every layer hides another, like the world's most stubborn onion. You pass a group of Persian soldiers patrolling near the gate, their armor glinting faintly in the sun. They look bored, like men who expected more glamour from empire building. One of them yawns. You relate deeply. Here's your obscure tidbit. Under Persian rule, Jerusalem's priests were granted surprising autonomy, allowed to rebuild the temple and manage their own religious affairs, so long as taxes were paid on time. You can't help thinking that some things never change. You follow the smell of incense toward the rebuilt temple. The steps are busy, priests in white linen, merchants selling birds for sacrifice, families carrying baskets of grain. There's chatter, laughter, even a little arguing. Religion, it turns out, is never entirely solemn. Inside, it's dim and echoing. The light from oil lamps dances across gold and cedar, the air thick with ritual and devotion. You stay near the edge, watching quietly. It's impossible not to feel something here: reverence, awe, or maybe just a deep awareness that countless others have stood in this same spot, whispering the same names into eternity. Outside, you find a shaded spot beneath a fig tree. You sit, watching the world go by. A man nearby is teaching a group of children to recite prayers. Another strums a lyre softly. A woman draws water, her bangles chiming faintly. You realize that life, even here, even under the weight of history, is just life. People love, argue, trade, sing. Empires can come and go, but supper still needs cooking. Historians still debate, you think wryly, whether humans ever learn from history or just rebrand it every few centuries. The sun dips lower, painting the hills in honey and bronze. From the east, a breeze carries the faint scent of the desert, sharp, clean, ancient. You close your eyes, letting it wash over you. When you open them again, the city glows softly in lamplight. For now, it's peaceful. You know it won't last, but that's all right. Peace, like sleep, doesn't need to be permanent to matter. You stand, stretch, and begin walking again, deeper into the winding alleys of time. Somewhere ahead, the next empire waits. And you? You just keep walking. You wake to the scent of smoke. Not the kind that comes from firewood or incense. This is the sharper, metallic tang of something grander, heavier, more imperial. When you step into the morning light, you realize the skyline has changed again. There are banners now, tall and red, fluttering over rooftops. Roman banners. It's the 1st century BC, and Jerusalem has traded Persian robes for Roman sandals. And oh, the Romans have arrived with their usual flair: wide roads, marble arches, and the smug certainty that civilization has finally come to town. You walk past the newly paved street where workers are still setting stones, their hammers ringing in rhythmic harmony. The city feels both familiar and foreign, like a house rearranged while you were asleep. You pass a baker's stall, now selling loaves shaped into perfect squares, a Roman innovation, apparently. The baker insists this makes them more efficient. You're not sure bread ever needed efficiency, but you nod politely. And here's your major historical fact for this section. In 63 BC, the Roman general Pompey captured Jerusalem, marking the beginning of Roman rule over Judea, a rule that would last, in one form or another, for centuries. You can almost hear the sound of legionnaires marching beyond the walls, the measured, relentless rhythm of empire. At the market, Roman coins clink in the hands of local traders. Some refuse to use them, preferring older shekels stamped with Hebrew inscriptions. Others shrug and mutter, "Money's money." It's a debate that never really ends. You stop by a small workshop where a craftsman is chiseling an inscription in Latin above a doorway. He glances at you and says, "When in Jerusalem," before trailing off, as if even he's not sure how that sentence ends. The city has grown louder. There are Roman baths now, complete with murals of Neptune and Venus that make the locals deeply uncomfortable. One elder mutters that if the gods are this relaxed, no wonder Rome is successful. There's tension in the air, the kind that precedes something inevitable. The Romans are patient, but the people here are stubborn, and faith doesn't bend easily under foreign architecture. You walk up toward the Temple Mount, where priests still perform their rituals, though now under the watchful eyes of soldiers. The contrast is striking, divine devotion and military discipline existing side by side, both claiming permanence. At a small stall near the gate, a boy sells pomegranates and whispers stories to passing travelers. He tells you one about a man named Herod, a king appointed by Rome, half Jewish, half political balancing act. The boy grins and says, "He builds things. Big things. Maybe too big." He's not wrong. Herod the Great, as history will later call him, is in full swing. Massive walls rise, palaces gleam with imported marble, and the temple, the Second Temple, is being rebuilt, grander than ever. And yet, something uneasy lingers beneath all that stone. Herod's brilliance is matched only by his paranoia. He trusts no one, not priests, not family, not even his reflection, you suspect. As the sun sets, you find yourself wandering through one of his new colonnades. The marble columns glow faintly pink in the dying light. It's beautiful, in that overconfident Roman way, beauty designed to remind you who's in charge. You pause near a fountain, watching the ripples shimmer across the water. A woman nearby tosses a coin in and makes a wish. You wonder if she's wishing for peace, or perhaps just for her husband to stop quoting Latin at breakfast. Your obscure tidbit for tonight: Roman soldiers stationed in Jerusalem often wrote home complaining about the local food, describing it as too bland, though one letter mentions a fondness for local dates and wine. You smile. It's oddly comforting to know that, even amid empire and upheaval, culinary complaints remain eternal. The stars appear one by one, slow and deliberate. You lean against a pillar, feeling the coolness of stone seep into your back. The city glows below, oil lamps, torches, quiet conversations carried on the wind. And for a moment, you can almost forget the politics and the armies and the waiting storm. For a moment, Jerusalem feels simply alive. Historians still debate whether Herod's renovations were acts of faith or vanity. But as you gaze upon his shining city, it's clear that maybe, just maybe, both can exist in the same breath. You yawn. The night deepens. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster crows too early. You think, not for the first time, that history has terrible timing. When you wake again, the air is heavy. Dust hangs low in the sunlight, and the usual hum of the city is replaced by something more brittle: tension, whispered prayers, the metallic scrape of swords being sharpened somewhere unseen. You step outside. It's the early 1st century CE now, and Jerusalem is a tinderbox. Rome rules, but barely. Taxes are high, tempers are higher, and messiahs seem to appear every other month, each claiming to be the one who will finally restore the kingdom. Some are prophets, others charlatans. All are exhausted. You wander through the lower market, where vendors argue over prices while eyeing Roman patrols. A man selling clay lamps mutters that he's seen too many soldiers for one lifetime. You nod, though you've seen even more. Above the city, the temple gleams in the sun, magnificent and solemn. Crowds gather on its steps, praying, debating, dreaming aloud of liberation. You can feel it, that fragile edge where faith becomes fury. Here's your historical fact for this section. In 66 CE, tensions between Rome and the Jewish population erupted into the First Jewish-Roman War, a revolt that would lead to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. But for now, that destruction hasn't come. You're still in the tense quiet before the storm. A group of zealots passes you, their faces hidden under cloth. One stops and says, "No empire lasts forever." You think of Rome, vast, polished, overconfident, and suspect he's right. But you also know that forever is a very long time to measure by sword. The city hums with conflicting rhythms. Roman trumpets sound in the distance while priests chant in the temple. Faith and empire echo off each other like two stubborn mountains. You pass a group of children chasing each other through an alley, their laughter momentarily drowning out the tension. Life continues, oblivious to prophecy. A young scribe sits near the gate, copying scrolls by candlelight. His fingers are stained with ink. He glances up at you and smiles faintly. "We write so something will survive," he says softly. You nod. You understand. Your obscure tidbit for this section: some scholars believe that during the early revolts, Secret messages were hidden inside clay jars and buried outside the city walls, one of the oldest known forms of coded resistance. It's poetic, really, defiance preserved in pottery. By nightfall, the sky burns orange. Smoke rises from somewhere distant. The sound of shouting drifts through the streets, muffled but growing. You walk toward the old walls, feeling the vibration of unrest in every stone. A Roman patrol passes. Their faces are blank, unreadable. The centurion at the front catches your gaze for a heartbeat, then looks away, as if even he doesn't want to admit what's coming. Historians still debate, you think, whether the fall of Jerusalem was inevitable or simply tragic timing. Either way, inevitability and tragedy tend to share a table. You stop near a small courtyard, where an old woman lights a candle at her doorstep. Her hands tremble slightly. She looks at you and says, "Every night, I pray the city will sleep in peace. Every morning, it wakes to argue." You smile sadly. Some prayers never change. The night air cools, and you wrap your cloak tighter. Somewhere behind you, the first sparks of rebellion catch, a distant clang of steel, a cry, a horn. The kind of sounds that start quietly and end in ruins. You turn back toward the city, watching its lights flicker like stars about to fall. For now, the city still stands, holy, divided, beloved, doomed. You exhale. You walk. The story continues. You wake to the sound of silence. Not peace, silence. The kind that hangs in the air after everything that could be said has been shouted, and everything that could be broken already lies in pieces. You walk through what's left of Jerusalem. The streets you once knew, the baker's corner, the laughing fountain, the scribe's little shop, are buried under ash. The city feels like a memory half remembered, a face you can't quite recall. It's 70 C. The siege has ended. And for the first time in centuries, the city is empty. Your major historical fact tonight. In 70 C, the Roman general Titus besieged Jerusalem and destroyed the Second Temple, an event that forever reshaped Jewish history and identity. You pass under an arch, cracked, half-buried, still proud. The stones seem to whisper, "We were here." Smoke drifts in the wind, carrying the faint, bitter scent of burned olive oil. You pick up a shard of pottery. It's warm still, smooth against your palm. Once, maybe, it held wine or hope. Now it holds nothing. The few survivors wander like ghosts. A woman searches the rubble for a ring she'll never find. A boy sits in the shadow of a toppled column, tracing lines in the dust that used to be home. Above you, the Roman standards still wave, gold eagles gleaming in the sun. You think of the centurion who once said nothing lasts forever. He was right, of course. But forever is still too soon. You pass through what was once the temple courtyard. The air feels heavy, wholly still. You imagine the echo of prayers rising, even as stones fall. You stop to rest near a broken wall. Someone has carved words into the stone in hurried Hebrew. "We will remember." And you do. You sit quietly, letting the heat and grief settle over you like dust. Here's your obscure tidbit. After the destruction, Roman soldiers paraded the temple treasures through the streets of Rome, including the golden menorah. Some legends say it was later hidden beneath the Tiber River, though historians still debate whether it truly survived that journey. You smile faintly at the thought. History loves hiding its toys. The day drifts into evening. The sunset turns the ruins gold, and for a moment, you see beauty again, fragile, uninvited, but stubborn. A child's laughter echoes somewhere distant. Maybe you imagined it. Or maybe not. Life, like weeds, grows through cracks. You walk toward the city gate, where the old stones meet open desert. Behind you, the city burns quietly, not in rage, but remembrance. You whisper a goodnight to the wind. And though it carries no answer, the silence feels less lonely. The desert hums differently now. When you open your eyes again, centuries have passed. The Roman eagles are gone, the sand has shifted, and the ruins of Jerusalem have been claimed and reclaimed by time. It's the 4th century CE. The world has changed, though not entirely improved. You walk into the city again, and what do you find? Churches. Bells. Pilgrims with hopeful faces and sunburned necks. Jerusalem, once a ruin, is reborn, and this time, it's under the sign of the cross. Your historical fact for tonight. In 326 CE, Emperor Constantine's mother, Helena, made a pilgrimage to Jerusalem and initiated the construction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, believed to mark the site of Jesus' crucifixion and burial. The air smells different, incense instead of smoke. The chants echo down marble corridors instead of stone alleys. You follow them, the low hum vibrating softly under your skin. You pass a group of pilgrims kneeling in the dust. One clutches a splinter of wood, claiming it's from the true cross. Another kisses the ground, weeping softly. You can't tell if it's faith or exhaustion, maybe both. The city's narrow streets are alive again, filled with vendors selling water, olives, and tiny crosses carved from olive wood. A merchant waves one at you and says, "Guaranteed authentic, unless it isn't." You chuckle. Even holiness has marketing. Here's your obscure tidbit. Early Christian pilgrims in Jerusalem often carried small flasks of holy oil or soil back to their homelands, believing it could heal the sick or protect against storms. Historians still debate whether this was sincere devotion or just ancient souvenir shopping. You sit on a low wall and watch the pilgrims climb the hill toward the new church. Their sandals kick up small clouds of dust, glowing in the evening sun. Some sing softly. Others simply breathe. You imagine how far they've walked, not just in miles, but in hope. Nearby, a monk tends to a tiny garden. He waters each plant carefully, whispering prayers to every leaf. When you ask what he's growing, he smiles and says, "Patience." You suspect it's the only thing that truly flourishes here. The air cools as night falls. Candles flicker in windows, and the city glows like an ember, warm but fragile. From somewhere, the faint sound of bells rings across the rooftops. You look toward the horizon. The desert is still there, endless, quiet waiting. And though empires rise and crumble, though faith changes hands and names, one thing never shifts: the way this city makes the air feel heavy with meaning. You sit back, breathing in the dust and incense. You realize, this isn't just a city anymore. It's a memory made solid, a dream that refuses to fade. And as sleep begins to pull at your edges, you hear a whisper, soft and amused. "Don't worry. You probably won't make it through this age either." You smile. History, it seems, has a sense of humor. The morning light in Jerusalem never really starts. It sort of drifts in, lazy and golden, like it's seen enough history and refuses to rush. You stand again at the city's edge, though now, it's the 7th century. The skyline has changed once more. Gone are the marble crosses, and in their place rises something new, graceful, domed, shimmering in the morning sun. The Dome of the Rock. Your major historical fact for tonight. In 691 CE, the Umayyad Caliph Abd al-Malik commissioned the Dome of the Rock, one of the earliest and most stunning examples of Islamic architecture, built on the site of the ancient Jewish temple. You step closer. The mosaic tiles glitter in hues of turquoise and gold. Arabic calligraphy winds around the dome's base, elegant, reverent, infinite. The air hums with quiet awe. Jerusalem, it seems, has turned another page. At the door, a guard nods politely as you remove your sandals. Inside, the space feels like a sigh, wide, soft, echoing. The rock beneath your feet seems ancient beyond measure, older than stories themselves. You hear murmurs, not of conflict, but of wonder. Pilgrims whisper prayers in languages you can't name. A child tugs at her mother's sleeve and asks, "Why does everyone love this city?" The mother smiles faintly. "Because it won't stop asking questions," she says. Outside, the market thrives again. Saffron, copper, figs, and fabric, color everywhere. You stop to watch a man carving verses into a slab of wood. His hands are steady, his eyes calm. When you ask what it says, he smiles and replies, "Everything changes except the dust." Obscure tidbit of the night. During the early Islamic period, Jewish and Christian communities continued to live and worship in Jerusalem under agreements of protection, paying a tax called the jizya in exchange for security and autonomy. Historians still debate how fair those arrangements really were, though fairness has never been the city's strong suit. As evening sets in, the call to prayer rises from the minarets, weaving through the alleys like a song made of light. You pause, listening. The notes drift past the old Roman stones, over the faint ruins of the Second Temple, past the places Helena once walked. The wind shifts, carrying centuries in its breath. You walk down the narrow lane where the stones feel smooth under your sandals. You can almost hear them remembering the weight of every footstep: soldier, monk, merchant, pilgrim. Someone hands you a date fruit, smiling. "You look tired," they say. You are. But it's a good kind of tired, the kind earned by walking through time itself. As you bite into the fruit, its sweetness lingers longer than expected. You look at the golden city under twilight and think, perhaps this place doesn't belong to any one faith, but to longing itself. The stars appear, one by one, and the dome gleams softly under their gaze. You lean against a cool wall, sigh, and let your eyes close. The city hums around you, ancient, endless, alive. When you open your eyes again, it's centuries later, the 11th century. The world has grown sharper, hungrier. Pilgrims still come, but now they carry swords. The air smells of metal and sweat. Horses snort nervously near the city walls. You hear shouts, orders barked in Latin, curses muttered in Arabic. Welcome to the Crusades. Your historical fact for this section. In 1099, European crusaders captured Jerusalem after a brutal siege, claiming it as a Christian kingdom and establishing the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem. You watch them enter, banners waving, armor glinting, faces both terrified and triumphant. The city that once hummed with prayers now echoes with the uneasy rhythm of victory. You walk through the narrow streets again, though this time, they feel smaller, tighter, as if the buildings themselves are holding their breath. A crusader kneels to pray on a stone that was sacred to someone else centuries before. You think of how holiness here seems to recycle itself like candle wax, melted, reshaped, relit. You pass a small chapel, hastily decorated with wooden crosses and tattered cloth. Inside, a priest prays aloud. "Let this city finally find peace." You almost laugh. He doesn't sound convinced either. Outside, a merchant sells tiny iron crosses. "Blessed by the new king," he shouts. Then, lowering his voice, "Or the old one. Depends who's buying." Your obscure tidbit. Some crusaders believed Jerusalem's dust itself was holy. They would scoop it up into small pouches to bring home as relics or tokens of divine favor. Historians still debate how many of those pouches actually contained anything other than plain dirt. Night falls. The city glows again, not with fires of ruin this time, but with torches. The light flickers over the golden dome, still standing, still magnificent, though renamed and rededicated once more. You sit at the edge of the market square, now filled with foreign accents and uneasy smiles. A knight leans against a pillar, helmet off, staring blankly into the middle distance. You ask what he's thinking about. He shrugs. I thought victory would feel different. You nod. It usually does. Somewhere, a monk begins to sing softly in Latin. The notes float up, meeting the call to prayer still echoing faintly from distant quarters. For a brief moment, just one heartbeat, the two sounds overlap, forming something fragile and beautiful. Then they fade. You breathe in. The city smells of smoke, spices, and confusion. The usual. You find a quiet corner, sit down, and rest your head against the cool wall. You whisper, half to yourself, half to the wind. Will it ever end? The wind doesn't answer. It's too busy remembering other wars. You close your eyes again, and the city hums, restless in its sleep. When you wake again, Jerusalem has shifted, as it always does. The banners of the Latin kings have faded, and new ones ripple above the ramparts. The crescent moon flutters once more, silent and sure. It's 1187, and you are standing in the wind beside the great Saladin. Your historical fact. In 1187, Sultan Salah ad-Din, known in the West as Saladin, recaptured Jerusalem from the Crusaders, ending nearly 90 years of Christian rule. His victory became legendary for its mercy. The city was taken without a massacre. You hear the soft rustle of his robes as he steps forward, calm but unyielding. Behind him, soldiers murmur prayers instead of shouts. They don't break gates, they open them. You watch as he orders guards to escort women, children, and monks safely from the city. One of his officers hesitates. Even the knights, my lord? Saladin nods. Even the knights. It's a strange sight, a conquest without chaos. No flames, no shrieking horses. Just the slow exchange of power, dignified and inevitable. You wander the streets after, and find Jerusalem, quieter. It feels almost relieved, like an old tree that's finally stopped shaking in the wind. You sit with an old man polishing brass lamps. He looks up and says, "Every king thinks he's the first one to win this city." Then he laughs softly. "None of them ever stay." You ask him how long he's lived here. He shrugs. "Long enough to know the stones better than the names." Obscure tidbit. When Saladin entered the city, he ordered that the Christian churches be respected, and even allowed some to continue holding services. The Dome of the Rock was cleansed and rededicated as a mosque, but not by destroying anything, merely by washing the floors with rose water. The scent of roses still lingers faintly, centuries later. Historians still debate whether Saladin's mercy was pure faith, political calculation, or both. Maybe it doesn't matter. Kindness always feels a little strategic in Jerusalem. That night you stand on the Mount of Olives. The wind lifts your hair, cool and slow. The city below gleams in moonlight, silver and steady. You can see the lights of tents stretching beyond the walls, pilgrims, traders, soldiers, storytellers. You think about how every era here seems to leave behind two things: ruins and rumors. And you? You're beginning to feel like both. You walk back down, slow steps on smooth stone. Somewhere in the distance, you hear the faint plucking of an oud, a melancholy tune, neither joyful nor sad, just accepting. You pause near a well, and an old woman drawing water asks, "You lost?" "Always," you say. She smiles. "Then you'll fit right in." You laugh softly and look up at the stars, still the same ones that watched David, Helena, Umar, and Baldwin. You wonder if even they are tired of watching this city rise and fall and rise again. The night deepens. The air grows still. You close your eyes, and the city breathes beneath you, patient, ancient, alive. You awaken to the sound of merchants again, always merchants. This time, their language feels strange, foreign, somehow. European again. You rub your eyes. The calendar has skipped forward to the 13th century. The Crusaders are back, though fewer, poorer, and more confused about why they're still trying. Your historical fact. After Saladin's victory, European powers launched several more crusades, attempting to retake Jerusalem, but none succeeded. By 1244, the city was captured and sacked by the Khwarezmian Turks, leaving it desolate and in ruins once more. You walk through streets that look weary. Half-collapsed walls, shuttered stalls, dust blowing where once there were parades. Even the pigeons look like they've given up. You meet a knight sitting on a broken step, staring at a cracked map. "They told us this was the center of the world," he mutters. "Doesn't feel like it." You glance at the map. It's smudged with sweat and candle wax. You want to tell him that every army says the same thing, but he already looks haunted enough. Nearby, a few local traders still barter salt, figs, broken bits of silver. One of them tries to sell you a relic, a splinter of the true cross. You ask how he knows it's real. He grins. "Because I carved it myself." You can't help but laugh. The sound feels good here, even if it echoes strangely through the half-empty square. Obscure tidbit. During these chaotic centuries, some monks in Jerusalem created guidebooks for pilgrims, part map, part survival manual, warning travelers where not to drink the water, how to avoid false relics, and which alleys led to safer inns. Historians still debate whether any of those guidebooks survived, or if they were simply copied, altered, and lost like everything else in this city. You wander into the ruins of a small chapel. The roof is gone, but sunlight filters through in golden stripes. You brush dust from an inscription. "Peace at last." The irony is almost comforting. Outside, a windstorm picks up. Dust swirls through the narrow streets. You pull your cloak tight, but somehow, the air feels like it's whispering. Not words exactly, more like a rhythm, a heartbeat made of stone and memory. You sit beside a fountain that no longer flows, watching a boy chase a hoop down the street. He's laughing, shouting to his friend, "Catch it before it rolls into history." You smile. Maybe that's the best advice anyone could give in Jerusalem. The sun sets, a thick red disk sinking behind the olive trees. The walls glow one last time before darkness swallows their color. The lamps flicker on, one by one, like stars reborn at ground level. You lean back against a warm stone and think about how this city doesn't age, it just rearranges its scars. The night settles. The market quiets. You hear a muezzin's call, distant and soft, blending into the whisper of desert wind. You exhale slowly. The world around you blurs, and your eyelids grow heavy. You drift, past ruins, past empires, past the sound of men arguing over sacred stones. Sleep comes gently. Jerusalem waits for its next chapter. You wake to the hum of construction. For the first time in centuries, Jerusalem sounds busy in a way that doesn't feel like war. The air carries the metallic rhythm of chisels, the steady grind of wheels, the laughter of masons arguing over lunch. It's the 14th century now, the era of the Mamluks. Your historical fact. After waves of invasion and decay, the Mamluk Sultanate restored much of Jerusalem during the 13th and 14th centuries. They rebuilt schools, markets, fountains, and mosques, giving the city a new face, though still haunted by its past. You walk along the Via Dolorosa, not in a solemn procession but weaving between scaffolds and fresh mortar. Workers in loose robes climb ladders, placing geometric tiles with hypnotic precision. The colors, blues, greens, golds, shimmer in the sun like the surface of calm water. A stonemason looks up and grins at you. "Don't touch the walls yet," he warns. "They're still remembering what they're supposed to be." That's the thing about Jerusalem, even its stones have memories. You pass under one of the newly built gates, the smell of limestone and dust still strong. The city feels alive again, as though it's stretching after a long sleep. No kings, no crusaders, no grand armies today, just people trying to live. You stop by a water fountain. 2 boys are filling clay jugs. One offers you a drink. The water is shockingly cold, and the boy smiles proudly. "Built by order of the Sultan," he says, as if he himself commanded the workers. You nod solemnly, because in Jerusalem, pride runs deeper than bloodlines. Obscure tidbit. Mamluk law required builders to inscribe the name of their patron and the date of construction on every public structure. As a result, the city became covered in elegant Arabic calligraphy, turning walls into a living archive. You trace one of the inscriptions with your finger. The letters flow like water, graceful and deliberate. Somewhere beneath the dust, you can almost hear the echo of the craftsman's breath. Historians still debate how much of medieval Jerusalem's surviving architecture truly belongs to the Mamluks, or if later rulers simply claimed their work. But as you stand there, it doesn't seem to matter. The beauty is undeniable, the craftsmanship almost meditative. As dusk approaches, you climb toward the Haram al-Sharif. The air cools, pigeons flutter between domes. The city glows amber in the setting sun, and for once, it looks content. You find a small shop selling oil lamps. The shopkeeper, a man with a voice like gravel, offers you one shaped like a pomegranate. "For luck," he says, "or for remembering." You take it. The metal is warm from his hands. He chuckles as you leave. Every traveler leaves Jerusalem with something. Usually regrets. You'll do better with the lamp. You smile, holding it close as night falls. The city quiets. For the first time in your journey, it feels like Jerusalem is sleeping with you, not keeping watch, not fighting, just breathing softly under the stars. Morning arrives slowly, with the gentle scrape of a broom across cobblestones. You open your eyes to find the city in another century, the 16th now. Ottoman banners flutter above the walls, crimson against the pale sky. You stretch, stand, and look around. Somehow, the city feels bigger, cleaner, more organized, like someone finally decided to give chaos a schedule. Your historical fact. In 1537, Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent ordered the complete reconstruction of Jerusalem's city walls, much of which still stands today. He also revitalized the water system and opened the city to pilgrims from across the empire. You follow the sound of hammers toward the walls, massive, elegant, newly built. The stone glows golden in the sun. A foreman is shouting orders in Turkish. Nearby, a dozen workers haul baskets of sand. One worker wipes sweat from his brow and looks at you. He says it'll keep the world out. He mutters. But when has a wall ever done that here? You laugh softly. It's true. Walls in Jerusalem are like umbrellas in a storm, symbolic, hopeful, mostly decorative. You walk through the Damascus Gate, still under construction, and enter a marketplace that feels like a miniature empire. Spices from Aleppo, silks from Cairo, coffee beans from Yemen. The smells are dizzying: cardamom, smoke, sun-dried fruit, and fresh bread baking somewhere nearby. You stop at a stall where a woman sells strings of blue glass beads. She smiles and says, "To ward off envy." You ask if they work. She shrugs. "Sometimes. Depends who's envying you." You buy one anyway. Obscure tidbit. During the Ottoman period, Jerusalem had an official coffee inspector, whose job was to taste coffee in every shop and ensure it wasn't adulterated with cheap grains or dust. A bad cup could lead to fines or even jail. You can't help but grin at the thought. Somewhere in the city, a man is paid to nap between sips in the name of public service. Historians still debate whether Suleiman's wife, Hurrem Sultan, influenced his decision to rebuild Jerusalem, a rumor that's as romantic as it is unverifiable. But the story persists, and somehow, it feels right. Love and vanity have built many beautiful things. As night falls, you find yourself near the same spot you once stood centuries ago, the Mount of Olives. The city below gleams once more, but this time, it feels steadier. Minarets rise like elegant fingers. Lamps line the walls. The sound of evening prayer drifts through the air, warm and calm. You light your little pomegranate lamp. Its glow mingles with the city's. And for a moment, Jerusalem looks eternal again, not because of conquest or glory, but because people still live, trade, laugh, and sip coffee here. The wind cools. The stars appear. You exhale, slow and easy. The city hums beneath you, not fighting now, but dreaming. You wake to the scent of ink and salt. The year is now somewhere in the 18th century, that lazy twilight before the modern age, when maps were art and travel was an act of stubborn faith. Jerusalem, still Ottoman, sits quietly under the sun, half forgotten by the empire that owns it, and half revered by the world that dreams of it. From your window, the city looks almost like a sketch, lines of rooftops, thin smoke rising, and the faint shimmer of the dome in the distance. You step outside, and the first thing you hear is, nothing much. The markets are slower, the streets dusty, the voices lower, older. Your historical fact. By the 18th century, Jerusalem had declined in political importance but flourished as a destination for religious pilgrimage. Travelers from across Europe and the Ottoman world described it as a sleepy, crumbling, yet deeply spiritual town, a place both sacred and sad. You walk past a row of small workshops. A man is hammering copper bowls, their surfaces catching bits of sunlight. His apprentice, barely a teenager, fans the fire, bored out of his mind. Not many visitors this season, the man mutters, without looking up. They all prefer Cairo. Cairo has life. You smile and say, Jerusalem has patience. He stops, laughs, and says, Patience doesn't pay for wood. The streets are lined with dust, spices, and rumors. A group of Greek pilgrims pass by, chanting softly, their candles flickering in the midday light. They nod to you, their faces weary but peaceful. A cat darts through an archway. Somewhere, a bell tolls. The sound rolls down the hills like a slow exhale. Obscure tidbit. In the 1700s, some local guides in Jerusalem earned extra income by selling stones from the Holy Land to pilgrims, usually collected from their own courtyards. It became such a common trade that travelers joked about taking a piece of someone's garden home as a relic. You pick up a small rock from the roadside and wonder who will sell it to whom next century. Maybe you're holding a future miracle. You stop by an inn, where the owner tells you he once met a French cartographer who tried to map the old city. He gave up, the innkeeper says, pouring tea. Said the streets were designed by divine confusion. You take a sip. The tea is sharp and sweet, like lemon and firewood. Maybe that's the point, you say. A map that can't be finished. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem truly stagnated during this period or whether it quietly reinvented itself as a sanctuary for devotion over politics. But from where you stand, hearing the hum of quiet trade and distant prayer, stagnation looks a lot like peace. You find your way to the edge of the city as night settles in. The olive trees murmur softly in the wind. The stars are bright tonight, almost too bright, as if they're checking whether the city still remembers them. You do. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the chill of the highland air. Somewhere, a rooster crows early, always an optimist, always wrong about the time. And with that sleepy thought, you close your eyes. You wake to the sound of a clicking camera. Not just any camera, one of those big, boxy contraptions with bellows and brass, the kind that makes photography feel like sorcery. It's the mid-19th century now. The Ottomans still rule, but the world beyond has discovered something new: fascination. Jerusalem has become the darling of European explorers, artists, and holy daydreamers. Your historical fact. By the mid-1800s, Western photographers and travelers, such as Francis Frith and Felix Bonfils, began documenting Jerusalem extensively. Their images became some of the first photographs ever seen of the Holy Land. You watch a photographer position his heavy tripod outside the Jaffa Gate. He squints at the skyline, adjusts the lens, and says, "Hold still." The city obliges. Jerusalem has had centuries of practice in standing still. He removes the lens cap. Second stretch. Light pours in, capturing everything and nothing at once. "Perfect," he mutters, though you suspect every image he takes will look the same, timeless, cracked, and slightly crooked. You wander into the marketplace again. This time, it's louder. The empire's grip may be weakening, but commerce never does. You pass Armenians selling ceramics painted in impossible blues, Jews in black coats trading candles and oil, Arabs bartering for bread and brass. It's chaos, but polite chaos, the kind that hums rather than roars. Obscure tidbit. During this era, Ottoman officials in Jerusalem sometimes charged foreign photographers shadow taxes, a small fee per photo, justified as payment for capturing the Sultan's sunlight. You can't help but laugh. Even the light had a price tag. A donkey cart rattles past, carrying crates of oranges from Jaffa. The driver waves and shouts, "For pilgrims, for painters, for anyone still awake!" You wave back, realizing how much this city depends on those who dream of it from afar. You turn a corner and find an English priest sketching the dome of the rock. His drawing is beautiful, and completely inaccurate. The proportions are off, the dome's misplaced. You tell him so gently. He smiles, unbothered. "Art," he says, "is how the soul remembers, not the eyes." He's right, of course. Jerusalem has never looked the same twice. Historians still debate whether 19th century Jerusalem was truly as poor and neglected as European travelers claimed, or whether their eyes were simply conditioned to see ruin as romance. Either way, the city became a symbol, not of what it was, but of what everyone wanted it to be. You walk through the streets as twilight deepens. The lamps flicker on, burning olive oil and shadows. The smell is earthy, comforting, almost ancient. Somewhere nearby, a man plays a flute, its soft notes weaving through the alleys like candlelight. You pause by the city wall, newly repaired in places, crumbling in others. A young woman is sitting there, writing in a journal. She glances up and says, "Do you ever feel like the stones are watching you?" You think about it for a moment, then answer, "No. I think they're listening." She nods. "Good. Then maybe they'll remember what we forget." The wind picks up. The stars return. And once again, the city settles into that familiar rhythm, part lullaby, part prayer. Somewhere, a shutter closes on another photograph. Another piece of light captured forever. And you simply walk on, slow and warm and drowsy, through the heart of a city that refuses to stay still for long. You wake to the faint hum of something that feels both old and new, a telegraph wire whispering across a sun-baked road. It's the late 19th century now. The Ottoman Empire is creaking like an overburdened cart, but in Jerusalem, something unusual is happening: progress, the quiet, reluctant kind. Your boots crunch against the gravel outside the new train station at Khan al-Ahmar. A sign reads Jaffa, Jerusalem Railway, 1892. You blink. A train in the Holy Land. If there were ever proof that humanity refuses to let geography stop it, this is it. Your historical fact. In 1892, the first railway in Palestine opened between Jaffa and Jerusalem, funded largely by French interests and Ottoman permissions. The 54-mile journey that once took over 2 days by donkey now took just 3.5 hours, assuming nothing broke. You watch as the steam engine wheezes and coughs like an old man trying to blow out too many birthday candles. The engineer leans out, covered in soot, and yells, "We made it! Again!" The crowd cheers softly. A few people clap, others just nod, as though witnessing a miracle that they're not sure they should trust yet. You walk beside the tracks, feeling the low vibration in the earth. Jerusalem is changing. It still smells of dust and olive oil, but now also of iron and ambition. The market near the Jaffa Gate is busier than ever. Pilgrims still come, but now they bring postcards instead of parchment prayers. The city is slowly, awkwardly, stepping into modernity. A newspaper boy waves a bundle at you. The headline is in Ottoman Turkish, but you recognize a few words. "Sultan Electric Europe." He grins, missing 2 front teeth, and says in broken English, "Soon, light without fire." You smile back. "I'll believe it when I see it." Obscure tidbit. When telegraph lines were first installed in Jerusalem, some locals believed the wires carried evil spirits, or foreign spies. For a short while, shepherds refused to graze sheep near them, fearing the electric curse. The breeze carries the faint metallic buzz of the wires overhead. You half expect to hear whispers in them, and maybe you do, but it's just the wind. You pass a coffeehouse filled with men smoking nargileh, reading French newspapers they don't entirely understand. Someone's arguing about Darwin. Someone else's goat eats a corner of Le Figaro. The waiter serves you coffee thick enough to stand a spoon in. "Careful," he says with a wink. "You can't rush the 19th century." Historians still debate whether this period marked true modernization or a superficial performance for the Western world. Some say Jerusalem was sleepwalking toward progress. Others say it was wide awake, just pacing itself. The sun begins to fall behind Mount Zion. You find yourself walking back toward the old city walls, hearing the faint whistle of the departing train echo through the hills, like a sigh from the earth itself. Jerusalem, half ancient, half modern, always both. And you can't tell which part of it you love more. The next morning, you wake to church bells, muezzin calls, and the click of typewriter keys. It's 1905. Jerusalem has entered the age of ink and impatience. At the small Ottoman administrative office, clerks shuffle papers and argue about stamps. The city's population is swelling, bursting its old seams. You walk outside, where the new postal office gleams under the morning light, a strange modern box beside a city of domes. Your historical fact. By the early 1900s, Jerusalem's population had grown to over 60,000, Muslims, Jews, and Christians in roughly equal numbers. New suburbs were emerging outside the old city walls, marking the birth of modern Jerusalem. You stroll through one of these suburbs, wide, tree-lined streets with new stone houses and iron gates. The air smells faintly of soap and progress. Laundry flaps from windows. Children chase chickens. A cart vendor sells oranges and gossip in equal measure. A bearded man waves at you from a balcony. "You hear?" he shouts. "Someone's building a university." You squint. "Here?" "Yes. Somewhere nearby." He pauses, shrugs, and adds, "Or maybe in Cairo." The news travels badly. You laugh. News does tend to lose its luggage on the way here. You pass a printing shop, a miracle of ink and chaos. Newspapers spill from the doorway like eager children. Inside, the printer shouts over the rattle of his machine. "We print in 4 languages now," he says proudly. 4? Yes. Ottoman, Hebrew, Greek, and bad French. Obscure tidbit. In early 20th century Jerusalem, some shop signs were written in as many as 5 languages: Ottoman, Turkish, Arabic, Hebrew, English, and French, just to be safe. The result was often hilariously confusing, with mistranslations that made locals shake their heads for decades. You stop for a moment to read one. "Shop of honest candle and probably lamp." It's exactly as honest as it sounds. A few European tourists wander by, fanning themselves dramatically. One of them points at the old city and whispers, "It's so biblical." You look around. You see a donkey nibbling laundry, a baker chasing a pigeon, a boy tripping over his own shoelaces. Biblical indeed. Historians still debate whether this era's Jerusalem Renaissance was truly inclusive or merely layered, modern on the surface, ancient underneath. But you can feel it, that tension between old devotion and new direction. You walk toward the Mount of Olives, where the air smells cleaner and the city spreads beneath you like a quilt of centuries. The Golden Dome, the churches, the minarets, all stitched together by sunlight. You sit beneath an olive tree and pull from your pocket the small rock you took centuries ago, back when guides sold holy stones to pilgrims. It's still there. Rough, ordinary, unimpressive. And yet, somehow, you've carried Jerusalem itself in your pocket all this time. The wind brushes your face, whispering through the branches, carrying fragments of calls and bells. You lie back, close your eyes, and for a brief, sleepy moment, you hear the rhythm of the city's heart. It beats slowly, but it never stops. You wake to the dull, distant echo of thunder, though it isn't the skies doing this time. It's December 1917, and the thunder comes from the west. Cannons. Marching boots. History again, arriving late but loudly, as usual. You step outside and see a strange calm spread across Jerusalem. No panicked crowds, no riots, just quiet, uneasy curiosity. The Ottoman banners, tattered and wind-beaten, still hang above the gates. The city waits, listening. Your historical fact. In December 1917, during World War I, British forces under General Edmund Allenby captured Jerusalem from the Ottoman Empire. Remarkably, Allenby entered the city on foot, a deliberate act of humility meant to contrast with past conquerors. You stand on Jaffa Road as word spreads, the Ottomans are leaving. Some soldiers march away with weary dignity, others slip off quietly into the hills. A child runs past you waving a small British flag someone must have handed out minutes ago. And then, the silence breaks. Bells ring. A few old men cry. Somewhere, someone cheers. When General Allenby finally appears, he dismounts his horse and walks through the Jaffa Gate. The crowd watches, hushed. He says nothing grand, only, "This city is for all faiths." You almost smile. It sounds rehearsed, but the city seems to like it anyway. You wander toward the citadel, where British soldiers are setting up a small command post. Their uniforms are dusty, their eyes sunken, but they move with that energy of men who've survived something enormous. One soldier looks at you and grins. "You wouldn't believe the road up here," he says. "Oh, I might," you answer. "I've walked it for centuries." He laughs. "Then you know it's all uphill." Obscure tidbit. When the British first entered Jerusalem, the city's pigeons, unused to modern noise, reportedly fled en masse, only returning weeks later. Locals took it as an omen of new masters finding their balance. You look up and notice it, empty skies. For a city that thrives on sound, even silence feels like an event. As night falls, you walk through the streets, watching new signs go up in English beside the Arabic and Turkish ones. British guards stand politely at corners, looking half bored, half awed. Someone lights a cigarette and mutters, "It smells different here." You breathe in. He's right. It smells like change, dry ink, metal, and dust. Historians still debate whether Allenby's entry was truly as respectful as it appeared, or whether it simply ushered in another chapter of imperial management, wrapped in good manners. But tonight, the city feels tired enough to accept politeness as progress. You walk along the city wall under a half-moon. The stones feel colder than before, but not unfriendly. Just cautious. After all, they've seen conquerors come and go like passing shadows. You press your palm against the wall and whisper, "It's all right. You've survived worse." And somehow, the stones seem to agree. The morning light creeps through the shutters like it's testing the room before entering. It's 1920 now, the Ottoman years already fading into sepia memory. The British Mandate has begun. Jerusalem, once a quiet Ottoman backwater, is now the administrative heart of something new, something awkwardly called Mandatory Palestine. You rise from your chair and stretch. The streets hum again, but it's a different tune. Trams, British lorries, and arguments about boundaries. You step outside and almost trip over a telephone wire strung low across the road. Someone's trying to modernize this place faster than it wants to be modernized. Your historical fact. In 1920, the League of Nations granted Britain the mandate for Palestine, making Jerusalem its administrative center. The city saw rapid modernization, new roads, electric lights, telephones, alongside rising tensions between Jewish and Arab communities. The post office now has glass windows and clerks who wear pith helmets indoors. Across the street, a Jewish-owned bakery displays its name in English, Arabic, and Hebrew. The bread smells heavenly, fresh, yeasty, with a hint of caraway. You buy a loaf. The baker smiles politely and says, "Progress tastes better with butter." You nod solemnly. So does almost everything. Obscure tidbit. Early British officials in Jerusalem often struggled with local food. One famously requested boiled porridge at an Arab cafe, confusing everyone involved for 3 hours. You wander down toward the Mamila district, where new stone buildings rise beside Ottoman ruins. A tram rattles past, packed with passengers, locals, soldiers, monks, tourists. It feels like the city is auditioning for the 20th century and isn't sure if it got the script right. A group of scholars at the American colony sit under a tree debating archaeology, empire, and divine property rights. One woman says, "We're all guests of ghosts here." Another replies, "Yes, but at least the rent's good." You walk past the YMCA building site, where British architects talk about Anglo-Gothic dignity, while local stonemasons mutter about too many windows. Jerusalem, as always, is a conversation no one agrees on, but everyone insists on continuing. Historians still debate whether the British presence truly improved the city's infrastructure or simply repackaged colonial ambition with streetlights and tea. Either way, Jerusalem glows a little brighter now, both literally and metaphorically. The sun sets in streaks of gold and violet over the Mount of Olives. You stand on the rooftop of a modest British office building, watching the city shimmer below. A clerk nearby sighs. "I thought we came here to bring order." You chuckle. "Then you chose the wrong city." He laughs softly, shaking his head. "Maybe it chose us." You look down at the streets, still winding, still beautiful, still impossible to map without losing your way. And once again you realize, Jerusalem doesn't belong to any empire. It just lets them visit. You wake to the smell of fresh ink and stone dust, not exactly comforting, but it's the aroma of a city reinventing itself. It's the late 1920s now. Jerusalem hums like a beehive full of scholars, pilgrims, and soldiers who can't quite decide whether they're supposed to pray or administrate. You step out onto the balcony of a small room above Jaffa Street. The city stretches before you, electric lamps glowing against ancient domes, carts rattling past automobiles that honk like confused geese, and everywhere the chatter of 3 languages colliding in the air. Down below, someone shouts in Arabic, another responds in Hebrew, and a British policeman tries to restore order in English, achieving only moderate success. Your historical fact. By the late 1920s, Jerusalem had become a divided yet thriving administrative center under the British Mandate. Jewish immigration to Palestine increased sharply, leading to growing tensions between communities and intermittent outbreaks of violence, most notably the riots of 1929. You wander through the market, spice stalls, copper lamps, prayer beads, and little paper flags printed in London. The merchants eye you the way cats watch unfamiliar dogs, curious, wary, amused. A shopkeeper gestures toward a basket of figs. "Sweet as peace," he says with a grin. You buy a few, if only for the optimism. Obscure tidbit. During the 1920s, some British officials held mandate balls, lavish parties where guests dressed in biblical costumes, toga-clad governors sipping cocktails under painted murals of prophets. Locals found it equal parts ridiculous and endearing. You pass one such building, the faint echo of laughter spilling from open shutters. Someone's playing a gramophone record of a waltz, and the melody drifts into the night, mingling with the distant muezzin's call to prayer. Jerusalem doesn't seem to mind the mix. It's used to contradictions. You find yourself near the Western Wall, where prayer and politics now meet in uneasy coexistence. Men sway in rhythm, whispering to the stones. British officers stand nearby, pretending not to notice. The air feels heavy, sacred, and slightly electric, like the moment before a storm. Historians still debate whether the riots of 1929 were spontaneous or carefully provoked, whether fear was born from misunderstanding or manipulation. But as you stand here now, you sense the real answer lies somewhere simpler: too many promises, too little trust. Night settles over the city like a quilt made from mismatched patches, some soft, some frayed. You walk home slowly, the sound of prayers following you like an echo. Before bed, you write one sentence in your notebook. This city always remembers, but never agrees on what it remembers. You smile faintly and close your eyes to the hum of Jerusalem, half dreaming, half listening, like the city itself. You wake to church bells and construction noise, Jerusalem's twin alarm clocks. It's the 1930s now, and the city feels restless. The British are still here, but their confidence is fading like the paint on an old colonial wall. You walk down King George Street, where modern cafes serve coffee strong enough to start a revolution. The customers are poets, soldiers, and journalists, half of them writing about Jerusalem's new dawn, the other half predicting imminent collapse. You sip your drink and think, why not both? Your historical fact. During the 1930s, Jerusalem experienced major urban expansion, the rise of nationalist movements, and deepening conflict between Jewish and Arab populations. The Arab Revolt of 1936 to 1939 marked a turning point, as Britain struggled to maintain control. A newspaper headline flutters in the breeze: "Unrest in the hills." Below it, someone scrawled in pencil: "Same old story." You stroll through the new neighborhoods, stone villas in Rehavia, modern schools, dusty roads lined with eucalyptus trees imported by hopeful urban planners. A British engineer you meet at a corner sighs: "We thought we'd build peace, but all we've built are more roads to disagreement." Obscure tidbit. In the mid-1930s, Jerusalem briefly had a popular donkey taxi service, complete with official fares posted by the municipality. Tourists loved it. Locals mostly just laughed. You imagine a line of donkeys with tiny license plates, trudging through the old city, hooves clicking on cobblestones. It's oddly poetic, ancient transportation with modern bureaucracy. But the laughter fades when the first bombs go off in the market that same year. Not massive ones, crude, desperate messages made of iron and anger. You see the faces after, shopkeepers sweeping glass, women clutching children, a British medic lighting a cigarette with trembling hands. Historians still debate whether Britain could ever have balanced its contradictory promises: independence for Arabs, homeland for Jews, peace for all. The math, as it turns out, doesn't add up cleanly. You wander toward the Mount of Olives at dusk. The city below glows golden, deceptively calm. Someone nearby hums a tune. It's an old Ottoman lullaby, soft and mournful. You sit on a low wall and look out over centuries of rooftops and domes. You realize that for every empire, every ruler, every army that's passed through, Jerusalem has offered the same test: can you love me without trying to own me? No one, so far, has passed. The wind carries a bit of dust and the smell of oranges from the market. You close your eyes, and for a moment it's quiet, a kind of peace that feels fragile, like glass just before it breaks. You wake to the sound of boots on cobblestones and radios crackling with clipped British accents. It's the 1940s now, war years. Even in Jerusalem, far from Europe's front lines, the air feels tense, as if the city itself holds its breath. You walk through the narrow streets near the old city walls. Posters cling to the stone. "Victory will come," one declares optimistically. Another urges you to save fuel for the empire. You wonder whether saving hope would be more useful. The baker on the corner now sells bread with a little less flour and a little more patience. A British soldier stops by for his daily ration, tipping his hat to the shopkeeper. "We fight the war with tea and dry humor," he jokes, and the shopkeeper nods politely, not understanding but smiling anyway. Your historical fact. During World War II, Jerusalem was a strategic administrative center for the British military, hosting headquarters for Middle Eastern operations. Thousands of soldiers passed through the city, while Jewish and Arab residents navigated shortages, censorship, and rising political tensions. You notice that even the holy places have gone quieter. Pilgrims are fewer, processions smaller. Yet the bells still ring, the calls to prayer still rise, and the old stones keep their silent watch, as if refusing to care about human timelines. Obscure tidbit. During the war, a group of nuns in Jerusalem reportedly grew vegetables in their convent courtyard. Not unusual, except they trained a stray dog to chase away British soldiers who tried to borrow the tomatoes. You picture that dog, tail wagging proudly, defending sacred cucumbers. A tiny victory in a city built on centuries of larger, noisier ones. At night, blackout curtains cover the windows. The city, for once, feels like it's sleeping, the dark wrapping every street in quiet secrecy. You walk through Mamila, where shadows move between houses, whispering news from Europe, bombings, lost families, a world unraveling beyond the desert horizon. Historians still debate how deeply Jerusalem's people understood the full horror unfolding overseas, but you can sense it in the small ways. The silence after someone mentions a missing cousin, the newspaper folded too neatly to hide the worst headlines. Then, one dawn, you see something almost hopeful. The first rays of sunlight strike the dome of the rock, then spill over the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, then down to the western wall. For a brief, quiet moment, everything gleams gold. The city looks whole again, as if reminding you, "I've seen worse." You breathe slowly. Somewhere, far off, another radio crackles to life with Churchill's voice, defiant, raspy, strangely comforting. And for the first time in a long while, you believe the world might survive this century after all. You step out into a Jerusalem that is almost free. It's 1947 now, and the British flag flutters limply over Government House, the symbol of an empire realizing it's overstayed its welcome. The streets buzz with rumors. UN votes, partition plans, whispered predictions that no one dares to say too loudly in public. Everyone knows change is coming. No one agrees on what it should look like. You pass a coffee stall where men argue over newspapers. One stabs a finger at a headline. United Nations votes to partition Palestine. The other shakes his head. You can't divide a city like you slice a loaf of bread, he mutters. You silently agree. Jerusalem isn't bread, it's more like soup. Complex, blended, impossible to separate once stirred. Your historical fact. In November 1947, the United Nations approved the partition plan for Palestine, proposing to divide the territory into Jewish and Arab states, with Jerusalem designated as an international city under UN control. The decision was celebrated by some, rejected by others, and instantly set the stage for war. The streets grow tense. Barricades appear overnight, manned by nervous young men with rifles too big for their hands. The British patrols still walk by, but their shoulders droop, their exit tickets already printed. Obscure tidbit. In early 1948, as the British prepared to leave, they auctioned off leftover office furniture, telephones, and even typewriters. Locals bought them eagerly, both for practicality and for the strange satisfaction of taking home a piece of the departing empire. You imagine a shopkeeper typing grocery lists on a former colonial typewriter, the clack of its keys echoing like small rebellions. But the joy fades fast. Explosions, gunfire, shattered glass, the old city once again becomes a patchwork of barricades and prayer. You hear the same rhythm from centuries past, footsteps running, doors slamming, then quiet again. Historians still debate whether the UN plan was ever truly viable, or merely a well-intentioned impossibility. But standing here, watching a British convoy roll out toward the coast, you can tell, the age of empires is ending, and something rawer, hungrier, and far more personal is about to take its place. At dusk, you climb a hill above the city. Below, the lights flicker, some bright, some fading. You remember that first dawn, long ago, when you arrived here in imagination or dream, the scent of stone, the hum of prayer, the endless, fragile hope. You close your eyes and whisper, "Maybe this time it'll be different." Jerusalem, ever the realist, answers back in silence. You stand at the edge of a city split in two. It's 1948. The British have gone home, and Jerusalem is now both itself and its shadow. The gunfire has faded, but the echoes remain. You walk through West Jerusalem, where the smell of smoke still lingers. Families patch bullet holes with optimism and plaster, as if both are equally effective. Children chase each other through streets that used to be front lines, their laughter a stubborn form of resistance. Your historical fact. After the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, Jerusalem was divided, the western part controlled by Israel, and the eastern, including the Old City, held by Jordan. A barbed wire border, known as the Green Line, sliced through neighborhoods, cutting families and markets in half. You approach the Mandelbaum Gate, the only crossing point between the two Jerusalems. It's guarded, tense, quiet. You can almost feel the city flinch every time someone raises a camera or a question. Beyond the gate, the streets of East Jerusalem hum with a different rhythm: Arabic signs, Jordanian flags, the scent of strong coffee and diesel. You notice how both halves of the city act as if they're whole, yet each side aches for what it lost. Obscure tidbit. Some local cats reportedly learned to sneak across the Green Line at night, stealing fish from one side and scraps from the other. Even in division, the city's stray animals refuse to respect politics. You chuckle softly. Trust Jerusalem to produce the world's first diplomatic cats. The churches, mosques, and synagogues all continue their rituals, the prayers rising from different corners but converging in the same sky. You think back to the centuries of sieges and crusades, the way every conqueror claimed this land in the name of eternity, and yet eternity never bothered to notice. Historians still debate whether the division was inevitable or avoidable. But here, walking past the bullet-pocked facades and makeshift markets, it seems less a matter of politics and more a matter of gravity. Jerusalem attracts faith, conflict, and stubborn love the way the moon attracts tides. As night falls, lanterns glow along the border. Two Jerusalems breathing, side by side, unaware that history will soon demand yet another reinvention. You glance once more at the skyline, twin silhouettes under a single moon, and think, even divided, the city dreams of itself whole. Morning, 1950s. You wake to the clatter of typewriters and the scent of fresh falafel. A new kind of normal has arrived, shaky but determined, stitched together with daily routines and cautious laughter. On the western side, buses rumble past posters celebrating the young state of Israel. On the eastern side, Jordanian police direct traffic near Damascus Gate, the sound of car horns mingling with muezzin's calls. Two worlds, one heartbeat. Your historical fact. In 1950, West Jerusalem was declared Israel's capital, while East Jerusalem was annexed by Jordan. The city's division solidified, barbed wire barriers, sniper posts, and no man's land zones cut through once shared streets like Jaffa Road. You stop at a cafe overlooking the line. The waiter sets down coffee with a grin and says, "Careful, it's hot, like politics." You laugh, because it's either that or cry. Obscure tidbit. In the mid-1950s, enterprising merchants near the Green Line began tossing small notes tied to stones across the border, business offers, family messages, even recipes. This informal, stone mail, became an odd but touching symbol of defiance. You imagine a grandmother tossing a rock that says, "Still waiting for your visit, and bring sugar." It's absurd, endearing, and deeply human, like most of Jerusalem's history. The tourists return cautiously. Pilgrims whisper prayers at checkpoints. Local kids learn to distinguish the sound of Jordanian versus Israeli gunfire, the way others learn bird calls. And yet life insists on being beautiful. Pomegranates still spill their crimson seeds in market stalls, candles still flicker during evening prayers, and the air still carries that timeless scent, dust, olive oil, and something like hope. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem's division was sustainable, or merely a pause between storms. But to you, it feels like the city's holding its breath again, waiting for the next hand to rearrange its borders and dreams. One evening you wander up to Mount Scopus. From there, you can see both halves of the city twinkling below, two clusters of light divided by darkness. It's heartbreakingly beautiful. You think about how, for centuries, Jerusalem has survived not because people agree about it, but because they can't stop caring. A breeze rises, cool, quiet, ancient. It moves through the cypress trees, whispering something you almost understand. The walls may divide, but the sky does not. You stay there until the stars appear, and for a moment, you forget which side of history you're standing on. The dawn of 1967 arrives with a strange, electric stillness. You can almost taste tension in the air, a mix of dust, diesel, and something sharper, like anticipation. Jerusalem has grown used to its divided rhythm. Soldiers at the checkpoints, flags on rooftops, silent nods between people who once shared streets. But that rhythm is about to break. Rumors ripple through the markets. troop movements, speeches, threats. Radios whisper about war, though no one dares say it out loud. You walk near the Mandelbaum Gate again, that narrow strip of neutral ground that once felt permanent. It's eerily empty now. No more smugglers, no cats, not even birds. The quiet before the cannon. Your historical fact. In June 1967, the Six-Day War erupted. Israel fought neighboring Arab states, and in one of the conflict's most dramatic moments, Israeli forces captured East Jerusalem, ending 19 years of division. For the first time since 1948, the city came under a single administration. You hear it before you see it, the distant boom of artillery, the quickening heartbeat of history. People rush indoors, shutters slammed shut. You follow a narrow path uphill, where you can see smoke rising from the old city. The skyline, that familiar tangle of domes, minarets, and steeples, blurs into haze. Obscure tidbit. During the Six-Day War, a group of monks in a Jerusalem monastery reportedly refused to take cover, continuing their Gregorian chanting through the bombardment. "If we stop," one said, "so does the peace we're praying for." You can almost hear them now, low, steady voices echoing against the rattle of distant gunfire. And you realize, even in chaos, this city clings to its rituals like life rafts. When the fighting stops, the silence feels too loud. You walk toward the old city gates, where soldiers stand, stunned, dusty, and blinking at the enormity of it all. They look less like victors and more like people who've stumbled into something sacred and fragile. You slip inside the old city. The air smells of smoke and incense. Then, suddenly, a roar of emotion. People run, laugh, cry. Some fall to their knees. You follow the crowd to a narrow plaza newly cleared of debris, and there it is, the Western Wall, open to Jewish prayer for the first time in nearly 2 decades. Historians still debate whether the moment marked unity, or the beginning of another cycle of tension. But standing here, the details don't matter. You see old men press their foreheads to the stone, young soldiers weep openly, and pigeons scatter overhead like confetti made of peace and exhaustion. You rest your hand on the wall. It's cool, solid, indifferent, and yet somehow alive. The city has been reunited, but whether it's healed, that's another story. As dusk settles, you sit by the same wall, listening to distant church bells and a muezzin's call drifting across the hills, both voices trembling, both beautiful. It's the 1970s now. The dust of war has settled, though settled might be too generous a word. Jerusalem has changed. Cranes rise beside ancient stones, buses rattle through newly built streets, and the city pulses with a kind of nervous optimism. You sip mint tea at a cafe overlooking Jaffa Gate. Across from you, a group of archaeologists and Sahats debate over fragments of pottery like philosophers at brunch. "First century," one insists. "Second," another corrects. "Tourist junk," mutters a third. You smile, because in Jerusalem, even dirt has an argument. Your historical fact. Following the Six-Day War, Israel expanded municipal boundaries, unifying East and West Jerusalem under one government. Restoration projects began in the Jewish quarter of the Old City, and archaeological excavations near the Western Wall uncovered layers of structures dating back thousands of years. Tourism booms. Pilgrims from all corners of the world flood the narrow streets, clutching maps, cameras, and slightly unrealistic expectations of holiness. A shopkeeper waves incense under your nose, promising authentic biblical aroma. You nod politely, because who's to say sandalwood and lemon oil weren't part of the divine plan? Obscure tidbit. In 1976, a Jerusalem souvenir shop accidentally sold a batch of ancient coins that turned out to be from a local theater production of Ben-Hur. The tourists didn't mind. they said the story was better than the truth. The city is rebuilding itself, new hotels, wider roads, more electricity. Yet beneath the hum of progress, the old contradictions hum louder. You overhear debates about faith, ownership, prophecy, the usual subjects here, like weather small talk elsewhere. Historians still debate whether the 1970s truly marked Jerusalem's reunification or simply the beginning of a new kind of division, one of memory, narrative, and belonging. But to you, walking through the warm evening air, the city feels alive, complicated, and utterly itself. You wander toward Mount Zion, where church bells ring softly. A musician plays oud music near the walls, his fingers dancing across strings that sound like twilight itself. A few children chase each other past, laughing in Hebrew, Arabic, and English, none of them caring which is which. You think, maybe this is how Jerusalem heals, not in treaties or maps, but in the small, everyday acts of being alive together. The sun dips behind the hills, bathing the city in gold. You exhale slowly, realizing you've been holding your breath since the first war drum echoed through this place. Now, finally, it feels, for a moment, like the city is exhaling too. The 1980s drift in like a hesitant visitor, polite, uncertain, carrying both optimism and a faint smell of political tension. Jerusalem stands firm, radiant in the morning sun, though its stones have learned to brace for surprises. You stroll along King David Street, where modern glass buildings now compete for sunlight with 12th-century fortifications. The city feels like a layered conversation, half past, half promise. Somewhere nearby, a bus grinds uphill, a radio leaks pop music in Hebrew and English. Even Jerusalem, it seems, is trying to find its groove. Your historical fact. In 1980, Israel formally declared Jerusalem its complete and united capital through the Jerusalem Law. The move intensified international disagreement, with most countries relocating their embassies to Tel Aviv in protest. You pause near a stone bench where a group of theology students debate geography as if it were scripture. One says the center of the world is here, the Temple Mount. Another insists it's the Holy Sepulchre. A third shrugs and mutters, "It's probably somewhere near the nearest shawarma stand." You smile. Jerusalem breeds conviction the way olive trees grow, deep roots, stubborn and beautiful. Still, beneath the golden light, an unease hums quietly. Soldiers lean on rifles by the walls. Posters call for peace marches that never seem to go as planned. A vendor at the market sighs, "Politics are easy, peace is the problem." He gives you an extra handful of pistachios, as if solidarity can be measured in snacks. Obscure tidbit. During the 1980s, a Jerusalem cafe became famous not for its coffee but because its regulars included rabbis, imams, and priests, all arguing theology daily over cups of Turkish brew. Locals nicknamed it the Holy Roast. You walk through the old city at sunset, when the light turns everything to honey and shadow. The dome of the rock gleams like a coin freshly minted. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre breathes incense into the cooling air. It's mesmerizing, this coexistence of tension and transcendence, like a prayer balanced on a blade. Historians still debate whether the 1980 declaration truly strengthened Jerusalem's identity, or merely hardened its divides. But as you listen to the call to prayer mingling with the hum of traffic, it's hard not to think the city itself has learned to hold contradictions like old friends. Night falls. You find a small rooftop cafe overlooking the western wall. A soft breeze lifts the scent of cardamom coffee. Someone nearby hums, "Yerushalayim shel Zahav," Jerusalem of gold. You close your eyes, and the song feels less like nostalgia and more like a lullaby the city sings to itself. The stars shimmer faintly, as if watching to see whether Jerusalem can ever stop fighting long enough to dream. By the time the 1990s roll in, Jerusalem feels busier, brighter, and somehow smaller, not physically, but in the way constant headlines make even holy places feel oddly familiar. You hear it in the hum of satellite trucks, the clatter of journalists' typewriters, the polished optimism of peace talks. The world, once distant, is now just a phone call away. You start your day in a bakery near Mahani Yehuda Market. The air smells of sesame, yeast, and gossip. A woman behind the counter tells you, "The world's watching us again." And you glance up at the TV. There's a press conference, leaders shaking hands, journalists flashing bulbs like paparazzi angels. Your historical fact. In 1993, the Oslo Accords marked a major moment in the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. While the agreements did not directly resolve Jerusalem's status, they sparked new debates and cautious hopes for a shared future. Outside, you wander through the market's maze of stalls. Old men sell figs and pickles with equal pride. Teenagers in jeans argue about soccer. For a moment, Jerusalem feels like any other city, ordinary, noisy, alive. And maybe that's the miracle, not its holiness, but its ability to function at all. Obscure tidbit. In the 1990s, an engineer working on the Jerusalem Light Rail project reportedly found ancient pottery fragments every few feet, until he joked that the entire city was built on archaeology, not concrete. You follow the scent of za'atar and roasted nuts into the old city again. The streets buzz with new tourism, old tensions, and the quiet resilience of daily ritual. In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, pilgrims light candles with trembling hands. At the western wall, prayers are tucked between stones like secret letters to eternity. It's a decade of contrasts, hope layered with hesitation, progress haunted by memory. Children born during the Six-Day War are adults now. They carry cell phones and dreams of stability. Yet the city, timeless as ever, whispers patience. Historians still debate whether the Oslo Accords truly shifted Jerusalem's fate or merely paused the inevitable. But the people here have grown skilled at living in parentheses, between promises and postponements. At dusk, you walk up the Mount of Olives. Below, the city glows, gold domes catching the last light, modern towers blinking with red aircraft beacons. You sit under an olive tree, breathing in the scent of dust and jasmine. The air is warm and restless, like the moment before a decision. You think of everyone who's ever walked these streets, kings, prophets, pilgrims, poets, soldiers, all searching for peace and finding instead a city that refuses to belong to just one story. As night deepens, the muezzin calls again. Bells answer. You exhale, realizing that Jerusalem's song, though unresolved, is still beautiful, because it never truly ends.
The new millennium doesn't arrive in Jerusalem with fireworks or champagne. It drifts in quietly, like an uninvited guest hoping not to startle the house. You stand on a balcony overlooking the old city as the first dawn of the 2000s paints the sky a soft peach. The bells, the calls to prayer, the hum of buses, all sound unchanged, as if the city missed the memo about the 21st century. Your historical fact. In 2000, the Camp David summit between Israeli and Palestinian leaders collapsed, partly over disagreements about Jerusalem's status, who would control the holy sites, and how sovereignty could ever be shared in a city everyone claims as their own. You sip coffee that's too strong and too sweet, watching pigeons flutter over the rooftops. Down below, early risers sweep their shopfronts. A boy pedals by on a bicycle with one wobbly wheel. Life, as always, goes on, gently indifferent to political stalemates. Then the tension comes back. You feel it like static in the air. The second intifada begins, and suddenly the quiet streets grow wary again. Tourists vanish. Soldiers return. Jerusalem starts holding its breath. You walk down Jaffa Road one afternoon and notice that the bus stops are emptier than usual. People speak in lower tones, glancing over shoulders. A child clutches his mother's hand so tightly his knuckles turn white. The sound of sirens becomes part of the city's rhythm, like an unwanted percussion. Obscure tidbit: during these tense years, local cats, of which Jerusalem has an infinite supply, were jokingly called the only creatures that cross every border freely. Some residents even fed them as small acts of defiance, claiming that, if the cats are calm, maybe we can be too. Still, amid the uncertainty, small kindnesses bloom. A baker keeps handing out extra loaves to soldiers. A nun leaves candles on her windowsill every night. For whoever needs light, you find yourself whispering prayers you didn't know you remembered. Historians still debate whether peace was ever truly within reach that year, or whether the negotiations were doomed by centuries of memory that no treaty could erase. In the evenings, when curfews quiet the city, Jerusalem feels almost serene. You can hear the wind brushing the dome of the rock, the creak of wooden shutters, the murmured chants of monks. And for a moment, just before sleep, it feels like the world could still be healed by silence. But then the next morning, the noise begins again. It always does. And you realize Jerusalem is less a city than a conversation that refuses to end. The 2010s arrive like a flickering candle, hopeful, modern, and still trembling in the wind. You find yourself walking along the new light rail tracks, cutting through Jaffa Road like a silver thread. The trams glide by smoothly, humming like futuristic carriages in an ancient dream. Around you, coffee shops bloom with Wi-Fi and optimism. Tour guides wave flags, children take selfies, and vendors grin. Jerusalem 2.0, your historical fact. In 2017, the United States officially recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, sparking global debate and protest. The move reaffirmed old divisions while signaling a new diplomatic era, one still filled with uncertainty. You pause by the rail stop near the Mahani Yehuda market. The same smells, spices, oranges, fresh bread, but now mingled with the faint buzz of smartphones and espresso machines. Old men who once argued scripture now argue politics on Facebook. You step into the crowd, where past and present overlap like transparencies on a projector. A Hasidic man in a black hat crosses paths with a young woman in jeans and headphones. Neither glances at the other. Both belong here completely. Obscure tidbit: in 2015, a local artist secretly began painting miniature murals on Jerusalem's manhole covers. Tiny scenes of angels drinking tea, shepherds scrolling through tablets, prophets checking their watches. Residents called it the city's first peaceful rebellion. And yet, for all its progress, Jerusalem never quite relaxes. Checkpoints still stand. Walls still divide neighborhoods that share the same sunrise. You can almost hear the city sigh. Historians still debate whether the light rail, meant to connect communities, actually deepen separations, threading through invisible boundaries instead of stitching them shut. That night, you find yourself in a small cafe near the Damascus Gate. The lights are low, the air thick with the scent of mint tea. Someone plays an oud softly in the corner, a melody so ancient it feels like the stones themselves are listening. A poet at the next table scribbles lines in Arabic and Hebrew, blending words into something untranslatable but deeply human. You overhear him say, "Jerusalem doesn't need peace. It needs rest." You smile faintly because he's right. The city looks exhausted but luminous, like a candle that refuses to go out no matter how many winds blow. As you leave, the tram glides by again, its reflection rippling in puddles left by a light rain. For a moment, you see the old city mirrored in the modern glass. Temples, towers, and time itself stacked like layers of light. Jerusalem, eternal and unresolved, glows softly in the dark. It's early 2020, and Jerusalem has fallen strangely silent. You walk down Jaffa Road, usually buzzing with conversation and clattering footsteps, and the quiet feels heavy enough to hear. The trams still glide by, but their seats are mostly empty. Masks hide faces, and eyes have become the new language. You never thought you'd miss the chatter of tourists, the noise of school trips, or even the arguments in the market. But now, the city feels like it's holding its breath. Your historical fact. During the global COVID-19 pandemic, Jerusalem, for the first time in living memory, saw the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the Western Wall Plaza, and the Al-Aqsa Mosque nearly empty. Pilgrimages stopped. Even Easter, Ramadan, and Passover came and went under lockdown. The streets are washed daily, the stones glistening under the sun. You notice stray cats roaming in packs, claiming the silent alleys as their own. Someone left a bowl of milk by a doorstep with a note. For whoever still comes by, you can't tell if it's meant for cats or for people. Maybe both. You pass a woman selling masks with embroidered crosses and crescents side by side. She winks. 2 for 1, she says. In case God's watching both doors. You almost laugh, but it's the kind of laughter that comes out more like an exhale. Obscure tidbit. During the lockdown, priests from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre reportedly learned how to livestream prayers using borrowed smartphones. One monk, when asked how it felt, said, "It's like preaching to ghosts. Polite, quiet ghosts with Wi-Fi. The silence turns out to be its own teacher. You notice things you never did before. The soft hum of bees in the monastery garden. The sound of wind brushing through the cedars. The muezzins call echoes across empty streets, unchallenged by the usual bustle. It's haunting, but beautiful, like hearing the bones of the city sing." Historians still debate whether Jerusalem was lonelier in 2020 or simply truer, stripped of ceremony and spectacle, showing what faith looks like when there's no audience. And somehow, in that stillness, the city feels closer to what it's always been. A place where people wait, hope, and listen. You find yourself lighting a candle at home, not for ritual, but for company. Its flicker dances on the walls like an old friend telling you, "This too will pass." Outside, the cats patrol the quiet streets like tiny monks on 4 paws. The holy places sleep under the same moonlight they've known for thousands of years. And the wind carries something old. Not quite peace, not quite prayer, just the soft, stubborn heartbeat of Jerusalem. The world opens again, slowly, like an eyelid blinking after a long nap. By 2022, the pilgrims return, hesitantly at first, then in steady waves. You walk through the old city and hear laughter again. The smell of falafel and incense mixes with the sound of footsteps. And for the first time in years, you catch the murmur of languages, French, Amharic, Korean, Tagalog, all layered like music over stone. Your historical fact. After the pandemic, Jerusalem experienced one of its fastest tourism recoveries, driven by pent-up pilgrimage demand. By 2023, visitors to holy sites reached near-record numbers, even as global conflicts and inflation made travel uncertain. You stop near the Jaffa Gate. A group of teenagers from Italy take a selfie, nearly falling over in excitement. An old rabbi chuckles nearby, a laugh that sounds like sandpaper in sunlight. The world, it seems, is trying to smile again. But Jerusalem never does normal for long. A protest begins near the Knesset, banners waving in the hot air. Debates over law, rights, and identity fill the news. You overhear someone mutter, "Every few decades, this city likes to remind us it's alive." Obscure tidbit. In 2022, a small cafe in West Jerusalem became famous for naming its pastries after political events: the coalition crumble, judicial jam roll, and two-state strudel. Locals swore the pastries sold better during crises. You sit there for a while, watching the crowd swell and thin like the tide. A man with a violin begins to play, not for money, just because he feels like it. The notes drift up between the buildings, hovering like smoke. You realize, with a sleepy kind of awe, that despite everything, life keeps composing itself anew. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem's cycle of conflict and renewal is tragic or miraculous, or perhaps both, depending on the angle of the sun that day. As evening falls, the city glows. Lanterns flicker in the Armenian quarter. In the Jewish quarter, families gather for dinner. In the Muslim quarter, tea kettles whistle. And from the Mount of Olives, you can see it all. The golden shimmer of the dome, the glint of crosses, the quiet promise of survival stitched into every rooftop. You take a deep breath, letting the air taste like dust, spice, and memory. For all its history, Jerusalem feels like it's just beginning again. Cautious, hopeful, tired, and utterly beautiful. You think to yourself, maybe the miracle of Jerusalem isn't that it endures wars. Maybe it's that it keeps finding reasons to wake up every morning. You wake to the sound of construction, the most reliable alarm clock in Jerusalem. It's the late 2020s now, and cranes have joined the skyline like new minarets of modern ambition. They hum and creak above the old city, dangling steel and glass where stone once ruled alone. You sip coffee at a cafe that claims to have been open since 1912, though the espresso machine looks suspiciously brand new, and you watch as workers in neon vests cross paths with monks, soldiers, and schoolchildren. The city feels restless again, but not in the old way. This time, it's building forward. Your historical fact. By 2028, Jerusalem became one of the leading cities in the Middle East for clean energy initiatives, investing heavily in solar-powered street lighting and electric public transport. A quiet shift towards sustainability that even skeptics found admirable. The trams now glide almost silently through Jaffa Road, powered by sun and patience. Someone has painted tiny olive branches on the car doors, an art student's rebellion disguised as decoration. The air smells cleaner, though the same old debates still linger, heavier than dust. In a digital museum that used to be a Crusader-era warehouse, holographic guides walk you through 3,000 years of history. They smile, recite poetry, and occasionally glitch, mid-blessing. One of them freezes halfway through saying, "Peace be upon you," leaving just peace. It feels oddly appropriate. Obscure tidbit. In 2027, a local startup launched an app called Echo Jeru, which lets users overlay ancient maps on live street views, so you can walk through the 21st century while seeing where the Second Temple once stood, or where a Roman bakery sold bread to legionaries. You try it, of course. Through your phone, the alley beside you becomes a Roman market. A merchant's ghost shouts over the noise, selling figs and cheap sandals. You blink, and it's gone again, replaced by a graffiti wall that reads, "Same arguments, different gods." Some truths apparently never uninstall. Historians still debate whether technological innovation will ever make Jerusalem more peaceful, or just more efficient at remembering its own disagreements. As the sun dips low, casting honey over the hills, you wander toward the Mount of Olives. The old cemeteries are quiet. The new solar panels glint like calm seas. And from this height, the city looks almost small, fragile, glowing, persistent. A heartbeat surrounded by stone. A breeze picks up, carrying the smell of time and street dust. And for just a moment, you can almost hear the layers of time whispering to one another. Bronze Age prayers blending with digital alerts. Crusaders' hymns dissolving into the hum of servers. It's messy, it's human, it's Jerusalem. And somehow it's still standing. You walk through Jerusalem at night now, and the stars look the same as they did 3,000 years ago. Maybe that's the city's secret. No matter how many wars, empires, or Wi-Fi networks pass through, the stars refuse to care. They shine like quiet, ancient witnesses. The streets are alive again, but in a softer way. Buskers play slow jazz versions of psalms. The air hums with laughter and the scent of cardamom. You find yourself at a rooftop cafe where poets gather once a week, the new prophets of the digital age. Their microphones buzz as they read verses about faith, memory, and coffee prices. Your historical fact. By 2029, Jerusalem became home to one of the largest interfaith climate coalitions in the region. Rabbis, imams, monks, and secular scientists working together to preserve shared natural resources like the Jordan River Basin. You attend one of their meetings, curious. It's held in a garden where olive trees grow beside solar lamps. The conversation drifts between theology and irrigation, philosophy and compost. Someone jokes, "We've been arguing about water for 2,000 years. Maybe it's time we just save some." Everyone laughs, the kind of laugh that sounds like relief. Obscure tidbit. A monastery in the Judean hills reportedly switched to hydroponic farming in 2028, growing lettuce in reclaimed baptismal fonts. When asked why, the abbot said, "Faith should be rooted, but flexible." You wander home through the night air, your shoes kicking up echoes from older centuries. Somewhere nearby, a church bell rings. Not to summon, just to remind. You glance toward the dome of the rock, its golden skin gleaming under moonlight. And beside it, the quiet curve of the western wall, where slips of paper still rest like breaths held too long. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem's endurance is divine, geographic, or simply the stubbornness of those who love it too much to let it fall. You pause at a street corner you've passed 100 times before. It looks different tonight, like it's finally at peace with being ancient and modern at once. You spot a young couple taking a photo with the city behind them. They smile, unaware of the thousands of years that hover just beyond the frame. And as you watch them, you feel something rare. Not awe, not reverence, but a quiet affection for a city that never stops rewriting itself. The lights flicker, the wind hums through alleyways, and the world feels both impossibly old and just beginning again. It's the year 2050, and somehow Jerusalem still wakes before the sun. You step outside to find dawn glinting off polished stone, the same stones that have been walked for thousands of mornings. The trams hum softly, now magnetic, powered by invisible lines and almost total silence. Drones drift above the old city walls, recording sunrises for tourists who prefer watching history through a screen. You walk past them anyway, because screens can't smell cardamom. They can't feel the warmth of a bakery window, or hear the creak of a wooden sign that survived more regimes than anyone remembers. Your historical fact. By mid-century, Jerusalem was recognized by UNESCO as a living archive, combining physical preservation of heritage with digital mapping that allows scholars to explore centuries of architecture in virtual layers. The first city to function as both museum and metropolis. You pass one of the new peace gardens, public spaces built deliberately between neighborhoods once divided by politics and fear. Children play tag around olive trees, laughing in 3 languages. A plaque reads, "This ground once marked separation. Now it marks shade." You smile. Shade feels like victory here. Nearby, a historian in augmented glasses mutters into a wrist recorder, "Faith density still unusually high." You don't know what that means exactly, but it sounds true. Obscure tidbit. In 2048, a group of Jerusalem artists began hand-painting QR codes on old city walls that link to ancient prayers. The project, Stone to Signal, became an international sensation, part heritage, part digital scavenger hunt. You scan one. The text glows softly. "Blessed are those who mend what they did not break." You exhale. That feels like the motto for this whole century. Historians still debate whether humanity's high-tech world has deepened or diluted the sacred, but Jerusalem, being Jerusalem, seems to manage both at once. There's Wi-Fi in the Western Wall tunnels now, and yet people still cry there. You can order shawarma through an app, but the cook still hums psalms as he slices. As the day warms, you walk toward Mount Zion. Pilgrims take turns placing virtual offerings through holographic displays, but an old man nearby still insists on lighting real candles. He strikes a match, hands trembling, and the tiny flame outshines all the digital halos around it. You catch yourself whispering, "That's the real upload." And as the sun sets, Jerusalem glows the same way it always has. Light layered over shadow, faith layered over doubt. You think maybe the city isn't trying to choose between past and future anymore. Maybe it's learning to be both perfectly imperfect, endlessly alive. You find yourself sitting by the walls again, not as a tourist now, not even as an observer, but as part of the rhythm. The stones feel warmer than they should, holding centuries of sunlight like a memory. The city is quieter these days. Fewer soldiers, fewer shouts. More gardens, more schools, more laughter echoing from balconies. The strange. After so much fighting, the greatest rebellion seems to be rest. Your historical fact. In 2045, Jerusalem established the Day of Stillness, an annual civic holiday during which transportation halts for 12 hours. Residents are encouraged to stay home, reflect, and listen, reviving a 19th century mystical practice of collective silence. You experience it now. No horns, no footsteps, not even the buzz of electricity. Just wind and birdsong over the city's bones. It feels like the earth has exhaled after holding its breath for too long. You stroll to a rooftop where solar lanterns glow like little constellations. A young woman tunes a lute, yes, a lute, while her brother reads aloud from a digital Talmud that projects commentary in golden letters. She plays a soft melody, and for a fleeting moment you feel time folding. Could be 2020, 1020, or 20 BCE, it doesn't matter. The sound is the same. Obscure tidbit. In 2046, a cafe owner near Damascus Gate began serving aromatic history, drinks brewed using recipes reconstructed from archaeological remains of ancient wine jars and spice markets. The most popular item? A cinnamon fig tea based on a Roman recipe, marketed as Empire Detox. You sip one. Tastes like nostalgia with a twist of irony. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem's future peace was inevitable or accidental. A statistical miracle of exhaustion. You suspect it's simpler than that. Maybe people just got tired of losing sleep over eternity. You watch as drones return to their nests, streetlights dim, and prayers rise softly through open windows. The city no longer shouts its holiness. It hums it. The call to prayer, the church bells, the songs of Shabbat all flow together in an unplanned harmony. Slightly off-key, deeply human. A boy passes by selling glowing lanterns. You buy one, light it, and set it down beside the wall. The flame flickers against the stone. Modern light on ancient dust. And as the night deepens, you feel it. That rare, miraculous quiet that only Jerusalem seems to understand. It's the kind of quiet that says, you don't have to win the story to keep it. The year is 2100. You open your eyes, and the city of Jerusalem is glowing. Not with electricity, not with screens or power grids, but with a softer, deeper light. A light that seems to come from the stones themselves, as if every wall, every archway, every grain of dust has learned to remember. The air hums faintly, part breeze, part memory. You step onto the street and find that much of the city has changed, and yet, somehow nothing has. There are no cars. The air is clear enough to taste sunlight in it. The old markets still smell of spice and honey, though now they trade more in stories than goods. Children walk past you, their eyes reflecting holographic maps that overlay history onto the present. A shimmering vision where ancient temples rise and fall in the blink of an algorithm. They giggle as they swipe between centuries like postcards. One of them looks up at you and says, "Which Jerusalem do you like best?" You hesitate because how do you choose? The one built of faith? The one built of fear? The one rebuilt for peace? Your historical fact. In 2094, Jerusalem's chronoarchaeological project succeeded in creating a full sensory reconstruction of the city across all recorded eras. Visitors could walk through any time period, Roman, Ottoman, British, modern, seamlessly, via quantum projection fields embedded in the old city walls. You decide to try it. One blink later, you're standing in the 12th century. The sound of hammering fills the air as crusaders rebuild after yet another siege. The dust is thick, the air iron-scented, and a monk mutters about divine justice while balancing on a ladder that looks ready to collapse. You blink again. Now it's 1917. British soldiers are marching through the Jaffa Gate, their boots sharp against the cobblestone. A boy waves a flag, not quite sure which side it's for. Then the world flickers, and the century dissolves. You're back in 2100. A scholar beside you whispers, "It's all one Jerusalem, just different verses of the same song." You smile because that's exactly what it feels like. A song that's been sung for 5,000 years and never quite ends, even when no one's singing. Obscure tidbit. In 2088, a team of engineers designed the Eternal Library, a structure built into the bedrock beneath Mount Zion, capable of preserving human language for 10,000 years. It stores every recorded prayer, poem, and lullaby ever spoken within the city's boundaries. Somewhere beneath your feet, a voice whispers softly in Akkadian, one of the first languages ever spoken here. You don't understand the words, but somehow the feeling translates perfectly. We are still here. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem's immortality is divine or simply human stubbornness. Either way, it's hard to argue with the evidence. The walls still stand, the songs still echo, and the light still falls the same way it did when shepherds watched their flocks by night. You pass a woman selling tiny glass bottles labeled Jerusalem Air. You laugh, thinking it's a joke, but she insists, "No, it's real. People in other cities buy it to remember what peace smells like." You don't need to buy any. You just breathe. As the sun sets, the sky turns to molten amber, and for the first time, you realize the city doesn't need protection anymore. It just needs witnesses, and you are one of them. Night falls. The stars appear, not as points of light, but as reflections dancing across the dome, the churches, the quiet rooftops. Jerusalem seems to glow from both above and below, like a lantern cupped between heaven and earth. You walk through an empty alleyway, your footsteps echoing like small prayers. A cat slips past you, the eternal guardian of holy corners. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime made from ancient coins rings softly in the night air. You pause before a wall, smooth, pale, endless, and rest your hand against it. The stone is warm, almost alive. You feel like it's remembering you back. Your historical fact. By 2090, scientists discovered that the Jerusalem limestone retained microvibrations from centuries of human contact, a kind of memory resonance. Some claimed the stones could actually record emotions, though the theory remains unproven. Still, as you stand there, you can almost believe it. You feel echoes, laughter, tears, songs, whispered confessions. 1,000 lifetimes vibrating beneath your fingertips. You keep walking, past the old city and into the ring of gardens. A vast, circular sanctuary built where conflict lines once were. Now, it's a place for silence, for sleep, for the steady breathing of those who no longer fear each other. You sit beneath an olive tree older than most nations. Its roots are gnarled, but its leaves shimmer like silver coins. Nearby, An old man plays a flute, the same melody repeated over and over, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Obscure tidbit. In 2080, biologists confirmed that several ancient olive trees in Jerusalem are genetically identical to those from the Garden of Gethsemane, meaning the same living branches may have watched over the city since the time of Christ. You look up at those leaves and think, they've seen everything. Empires, prayers, bombs, silence, and still they grow. Historians still debate whether the 22nd century peace treaties that finally stabilized the region were written out of wisdom or fatigue. But as you watch two children, one in a hijab, one wearing a cross necklace, chasing each other through the grass, it seems like the distinction doesn't matter. Peace is peace no matter what brought it. The night deepens. From the Mount of Olives, you can see the city shimmering below. Domes like lanterns, streets like rivers of gold. Somewhere, a choir sings softly, not for an audience, but for the air itself. You can't tell if it's in Hebrew, Arabic, or Latin. It doesn't matter. The melody feels older than any language. You close your eyes and listen. The music drifts upward, mingling with the stars. A lullaby for a city that has finally learned to rest. The night hums softly, like an ancient string instrument tuned by the wind. You walk along the edge of the city, where the lights end and the desert begins. Here, the air feels both eternal and fragile. Every breath carries traces of incense, salt, and something older than memory. The moon rises, enormous, luminous, reflected in 1,000 tiny windows like silver eyes. A shepherd passes you, humming a tune that hasn't changed in 3,000 years. His flock glows faintly under the moonlight, tiny constellations on 4 legs. You stop listening. The sound of bells, faint and uneven, reaches you. Not church bells, but the tin clinking of goats moving through the hills. It's so ordinary, so human. You realize that Jerusalem, after all the centuries of prophecy and war, survives not through miracles, but through ordinary endurance. Your historical fact. By the late 21st century, Jerusalem was officially declared the global heritage city of humanity, protected under a new UN charter that banned all military activity within a 100-kilometer radius. It became the first demilitarized capital in human history. You smile. Took 5 millennia and countless heartbreaks, but somehow, eventually, we learned. A breeze sweeps across the sand, carrying scents of thyme and night-blooming jasmine. You can almost hear the layers of time whisper through it. Prophets and poets, traders and tourists, kings and children, all folded into the same sigh. You pass a group of travelers sitting around a small fire. They're roasting flatbread and passing cups of mint tea. One gestures for you to join. You sit down, the warmth wrapping around you like an embrace. The youngest among them, a girl with a tablet glowing softly in her lap, says, "Do you know how many names Jerusalem has had?" You shrug. She grins. Over 70. Everyone means peace, even when people were fighting over it. You laugh quietly. That feels about right, humanity's favorite contradiction. Obscure tidbit. There's an old legend that says if you write all of Jerusalem's names on a single scroll and read them aloud under the full moon, the city itself will hum back, a resonant vibration said to bring calm to anyone who hears it. You look at the moon just to check. It's full tonight. Somewhere in the silence, you swear you hear that faint hum, low, steady, comforting, like a heartbeat shared between the city and the stars. Historians still debate whether this hum was ever real or just a trick of the wind over the stone valleys. But in this moment, it doesn't feel like legend. It feels like the world exhaling after a very long, exhausting story. The fire flickers. Someone hums an old hymn, slow and off-key, but beautiful. You find yourself swaying slightly, eyelids heavy. In the distance, the city glows. Golden domes, Pale minarets, quiet rooftops, all shimmering under the moon like sleeping giants. Every shadow feels kind. Every stone feels like a hand resting gently on your shoulder. You realize, this city has finally done what it always promised to do. It has become a place of rest. Dawn. Soft and slow, like honey poured across the horizon. The muezzin's call rises first. A single gentle thread of sound, followed by church bells, then the murmuring hum of waking streets. None compete. They weave together, like the voices of old friends who finally stopped arguing. You walk back through the city, the cobblestones cool beneath your feet. The shopkeepers are opening their shutters, smiling faintly, as if they've already lived this day 1,000 times and still find it beautiful. A boy sells pomegranates near the Damascus gate. He offers you one, its red skin glowing like glass. You break it open, and the seeds shine like tiny rubies, the same color as the sun's first light spilling over the hills. Your historical fact: pomegranates were considered symbols of righteousness and unity in ancient Israel. Archaeologists have found carved pomegranate motifs on Solomon's temple dating back nearly 3,000 years. You eat one seed, tastes sharp and sweet, like truth. Somewhere behind you, the bells ring again. You turn toward the western wall. Pilgrims still gather there, though fewer now bring written prayers. Instead, they close their eyes, and small silver drones, shaped like doves, hover silently, carrying messages into the air. The letters drift upward, dissolving into soft light. Obscure tidbit: in 2099, the Cloud of Prayers project began, converting written prayers into coded particles released into the atmosphere, each carrying a trace of the writer's voice. On quiet mornings, some claim you can hear them faintly in the wind. You stand in that wind now. And yes, there it is, a whisper quiet as breathing. Not words exactly, more like warmth. Historians still debate whether Jerusalem's peace will last forever. Some say nothing human can be permanent. But as the sun climbs higher, you suspect permanence doesn't matter. What matters is that, for this moment, the city remembers how to be gentle. You wander one last time through its winding alleys. You pass the spice merchant from Section 3, his beard grayer, his eyes the same. You pass the olive tree you sat under, the same flute still playing. You pass the child who asked which Jerusalem you liked best. She smiles. You found it yet? You nod, because maybe Jerusalem isn't a place at all. Maybe it's a rhythm, a slow, stubborn heartbeat that keeps pulsing through human history, reminding us that peace isn't something we inherit, it's something we practice. And tonight it has been practiced well. The light softens again. The air grows warm. The sound of bells, wind, and laughter mingles until it becomes one long, steady hum. The sound of rest. Now your breathing slows. Your shoulders loosen. You feel the weight of centuries lift, like dust settling after a long day. You can let go now. Jerusalem is still here, always will be, dreaming its endless dream beneath the quiet sun. So take a deep breath. Let the story fade gently. Let the lights dim one by one, the temples, the towers, the stars above. You've walked through 5,000 years. You've seen faith rise, fall, and rise again. You've stood among kings and children, silence and song. Now it's time to rest. Time to let the city and yourself sleep. Good night, and may peace be upon you wherever you are.